It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
Rico Brogna! Can you feel the excitement? Can you feel the energy? We are now less than 1 week away from opening day 2025 as the New York Mets visit Houston, Texas to take on the Houston Astros in an interleague matchup to open up the 2025 season. On Wednesday night, the Mets played an exhibition game against the Astros, and it felt like a little bit of a coming attraction, a little bit of a tease. The Mets presented almost an opening day lineup, as close to an opening day lineup as we may see, if not the actual opening day lineup itself, against the said Houston Astros. David Peterson was on the mound through 5 scoreless innings, and the Mets had themselves a nice, fun evening in West Palm Beach, Florida against the Astros. A little bit of a preview of opening day, which is less than a week away. It's also finally spring, which is fun. You know, spring training is mostly in winter, and we are finally almost out of the doldrums of an off season and cold weather, and baseball season is almost upon us. Now, there's a lot of Mets stuff to talk about, so the way we try to neatly organize our priorities on a midweek Rico Brogna every once in a while is to hit 10 different Met topics. We call it the Rico 10. We will go through 10 talked about subjects in Metland. I will start from, I don't want to say the least talked about, but yeah, we'll say that. The least talked about Met topics all the way to the top. So if any of these topics bore you and you've already downloaded the Rico and you're driving to work in a very respectful, safe way without taking your hands off of the steering wheel, you can skip ahead. That's the beauty of an episode like this. So let's begin with Rico topic number 10, and that's the fact that Matthew Allan, a former third-round pick of the New York Mets back in 2019, a former top prospect, a guy that you probably forgot ever existed because he's needed multiple Tommy John surgeries and has not pitched in a game, a professional game, since 2019, when he appeared very briefly in Brooklyn, New York, and before that, in rookie ball. Matthew Allan is finally healthy, and he's throwing on the backfields and reportedly was touching 99 miles per hour on Wednesday and Tuesday in Port St. Lucie, Florida. So the way I would approach Matthew Allan this year is to not think about him making the major leagues. If he makes the major league someday, that would be an incredible story and really a tribute to him, because it takes a lot of perseverance and persistence to battle all the arm injuries that he's battled. But Matthew Allan is only 23 years old. He's going to turn 24 in about a month. So he is still young enough because he was drafted out of high school. He was 18 years old, 19 years old when he was going through all of these injuries. I think it's a really cool story. He's certainly a prospect I'll keep an eye on, especially when he finally gets into game action, something, again, he hasn't done this century. And we are halfway through the decade. This century wasn't the right term. This decade. I started thinking about it. This century? No, this decade. He's not pitched in a professional game in this decade. And we are now halfway through this decade. And here he is finally making his way back. So I look at Matthew Allan for now, as a human interest story, as a story of, wow, that's really cool. He's pitching in single A. Or, wow, that's really cool. He's pitching and he's doing it for the first time in 6 seasons. I don't think yet he's on my radar as, can he be a prospect again? Or can he ever make the major leagues? But I think it's really cool that this kid who has battled so many arm injuries is working his way back. The other thing I must admit, when I read that Matthew Allan is throwing 99 miles per hour, there is a part of me that says, is that healthy? Is that okay for him? He had multiple Tommy Johns. Like I said, he hasn't really pitched consistently in a very long time. Should he be throwing 99 miles an hour? I do wonder about that, because years ago, before we were doing the Rico Brogna, it was on the air with Joe. So I was doing middays, and we used to talk about DeGrom. And I would say to Joe, man, I love Jake, but something feels unnatural about how hard he's throwing and how often he's throwing it. And that was before he became, unfortunately, the injury-prone pitcher that he is right now. So when you hear stories about guys throwing in the high 90s, you know, even during the Dodger Cubs series, watching Roki Sasaki and how hard he throws consistently, there is a worry in the back of my mind that says, isn't this why guys, or aren't these the reasons why guys are getting hurt? So I hope it doesn't lead to anything bad, but good luck to Matthew Allen hitting 99 miles per hour in the backfields of Port St. Lucie, Florida, as he tries to work his way back. Rico story number 9. I'll call this some surprise cuts. There were 2 guys who were reassigned to minor league camp that I would at least put as mild surprises because we started to keep an eye on them as potential guys who could make the big club. Most of these reassignments throughout spring training are very predictable. Like, they don't become surprises or big decisions until we get the very end, and that's when we get the final 26-man roster. But there were 2 guys in particular that I was at least mildly surprised because I was keeping an eye on them as potential guys who could make the team. Number 1 is Luis De Los Santos as a backup infielder. You know, if they're going to keep a super utility player not named Luis Angel Acuna because they're going to want him to play every day in the minors, more on that a little bit later on, I thought De Los Santos may have a better opportunity than Donovan Walton because of Walton being a lefty and De Los Santos being a righty, but he hasn't hit that much in spring training. And so the Mets decided, you know what? We're not going to go with Luis De Los Santos. We're going to reassign him. The other guy is Chris Williams. Chris Williams, we've talked a little bit about recently because he's the catching option who can hit. And we went through his numbers, I'd say maybe 2 or 3 Ricos ago, that he would be the offensive option behind the plate. I know that's something, Hoff, you preferred as a backup catcher for Luis Torrens, a guy that can hit. And Chris Williams had a track record in the minor leagues as being someone who can hit. Well, obviously, the Mets decided that's not going to be our priority when we determine who the backup catcher is going to be. We're going to look more at defense, which I actually agree with because I think that clearly, without a doubt, Luis Torrens is going to play every day. And yes, I think there are going to be instances late in the game where you can use a bat off the bench to pinch hit for Torrens. And then that means late in the game, someone now needs to catch. I'd rather that guy be a good defender. So I don't necessarily disagree with it, but it was worthy of keeping an eye on. The other guy, not a surprise cut, but a reassignment of someone who maybe had a chance to become a part of the conversation is Joey Meneses. I think the inherent issue with Joey Meneses is he doesn't provide position versatility. So while he could have been a good right-handed bat, specifically if Starling Marte wasn't ready, you know, obviously Alexander Canario would have had the kind of the greater chance at it because of his ability to play the outfield. But there just isn't room for Joey Meneses. So I wouldn't label that as a surprise. But certainly Chris Williams and Luis De Los Santos, a couple of guys who are at least somewhat possibilities make this team, get reassigned to minor league camp. So the Mets, as of right now, as of this live Rico, or if you're listening on Thursday morning, recorded Rico, they are down to 44 guys. There are 18 more guys to go before we get to that final number of 26. Let's get to Rico's story number 8, and that was the fact that some of these young prospects we had a chance to at least get a glimpse at as the Mets played that spring breakout game a couple of days ago against the Washington Nationals, and it started to make me think, which of these prospects, whether it's Ryan Clifford, who hit a bomb of a home run, or Jonah Tong, who has looked very impressive and has really jumped up the Met prospect sheets over the last year or so, which of these prospects, not just those 2, but more, am I most excited to keeping an eye on? You know, I remember as a kid, Baseball Weekly, eventually it was renamed Sports Weekly, would be the way I would consume information about prospects. And what I always found funny is, you guys remember, this is a long time ago, the Mets had a left-handed prospect named Jason Hakami, and he eventually came up and actually had some success. But Jason Hakami, his last name Hakami, I know, what a fun name to say. Hakami was spelled Jacome. So for years, I shouldn't say years, for months, when me and my dad would read the Baseball Weekly and we would see these really impressive stats from this left-hander, Jason Hakami, we knew him as Jason Jacob. Because how the hell would we get Hakami at a Jacome? I only tell this boring story because back in the day, that's how we got information about prospects. That was it. We didn't get to see videos of them. We certainly didn't get to see them play in spring breakout games. We didn't have all these prospect ranking lists being updated, nor did we have that much information about guys. But we do live in a world where if you have the MLB package, and I advise it, I think it's awesome, Hopefully someday they'll lift blackouts, though they sort of are this year because SNY cut this deal with MLB. So I guess if you get the MLB package and you have the SNY package, you'll be able to watch the Mets in that same place you watch all these other games. But they give you the chance to see minor league games. So you talk about the evolution of getting to watch prospects or consume some information about prospects. It's obviously a lot easier to do it in 2025 than ever before. But Jonah Tong is certainly a guy to keep an eye on. I would assume, and I'm making assumptions here based on where he was last year and his progress, that Jonah Tong is going to start at Double-A. So you're talking about a guy that we're probably not going to see at any point this year. Now, that can change. Jonah Tong goes to Double-A and he dominates for 2 months. The Mets have shown that kind of willingness to then make the quick move and say, all right, go to Triple-A. And I think the Met philosophy is we actually want you to fail before you pitch well or hit well so that your failures can get out of the way at the lower levels. We saw that last year with the struggles that Brandon Sproat had at Triple-A. So Jonah Tong is a guy I'm very interested in, but Ryan Clifford is probably number one. You know, as much as I want to see Nolan McLean or more young studs come up, Brandon Sproat, Blade Tidwell, whoever you want to pick, as a child of pitching, I guess, as someone who loves pitching, the reason Ryan Clifford really intrigues me is because of the potential impact he may have on Met decisions that they make during the offseason. You know, Ryan Clifford is probably a guy they look at with the sheer power that he has, his ability to play first base. He's that guy who the Mets could look at and say, you know what? We are going to let Pete Alonso go. We aren't going to go after Vladimir Guerrero Jr. because we've got Ryan Clifford. Clifford was a top 100 prospect last year. He's still only 21 years old. For him, he struggled, at least for batting average purposes. He did get on base a lot, and he struck out an awful lot at Double-A Binghamton. So I'd be curious to see if they put him back in Double-A, where he played 99 games last year, or if he goes up to Triple-A. But can Ryan Clifford become that stud slugger who maybe changes some of the Met thought process next year during the offseason?
Well, that's kind of what I was going to ask you. Are any of these guys exciting you that much where it's like they're untouchable just yet or no?
You know, it's funny, Pete. I think we live in a different world, and there is going to be a Rico topic we're going to get to very soon, about 2 Ricos away. I don't mean episodes. I mean on the Rico 10 that I think will explain the differences in David Stearns. I think the Mets are going to be more aggressive. And so I would not call anybody untouchable. Actually, there is one person I would lean more towards untouchable, and it's probably Brandon Sproat. Because if I'm going to trade a young pitcher, and I'm the Mets, and I'm David Stearns, who has already shown you he's not really keen to going out and giving long-term contracts to veteran pitchers. And that's usually how you sign guys in free agency, or the guys that are usually available are guys that are closer to free agency. I wouldn't exactly have the stomach to be trading a top-line pitching prospect. So I wouldn't call anybody untouchable, but I think the closest thing to it would be the Mets' number 1 overall prospect, Brandon Sproat, who I'm also very excited about. I think like all prospects are interesting, and Sproat probably for most will be the most interesting because he's probably going to pitch this season at the major league level. I can't say the same about Jonah Tong or Nolan McLean or Ryan Clifford or Jesus Baez or a lot of guys in the system. Most of these guys are probably just going to develop this season, but no one's untouchable, Hoff. I've learned that in life.
No, I get that. But the one thing that sucks, though, is, and I know last episode you're like, okay, we're kind of done with spring training. I'm over it. But I kind of am excited about these young kids, and I see them. I see, like, you know, Clifford hit a home run. Now, forget about it. I mean, everyone was just praising it. And I'm like, maybe I do want to see them get called up soon. Maybe I do want to see them take the spot of, like, you know, Tyrone Taylor or whatever, you know, whatever it is.
Just remember this. Certain prospects being called up may be a bad sign. You know, if things are going badly, that's usually what we end up doing. If things are going well this season, there won't be a need or demand for young players to be called up. You want players to be called up when they are ready. You know, a part of why we were screaming 2 years ago for Mark Vientos and Francisco Alvarez is because there was a clear hole. There was clearly something that needed to be fixed at the DH spot. And one thing also about spring training and seeing young players, I do find it interesting, to watch Blade Tidwell when he made that start a few weeks ago, or Brandon Sproat. But I actually find it to be more informative, really, when they're pitching in minor league games. And I know it's tougher to get into it because let's say it's the middle of May and the Mets have a rare off day. It's probably better to just not watch any baseball. Or if the Mets are playing, mixing in a minor league game may seem like too much. And it is, trust me. But on those accidental moments where I'm like, you know what? I have an hour. Let me watch Brandon Sproat throw a few innings. I think those tend to be more interesting than spring training games, which at the end of the day don't really matter.
Oh, so let me ask you a question, because now that I'm thinking about the MLB app and I don't have it, so maybe I need to get this. Can you still watch all like the minor league games through there? Or is it different?
The thing I learned last year is it's not every minor league game, but they definitely give you options for some minor league games.
So
and that's cool. I remember a few years ago watching DeGrom on rehab. Like that was what was so he was pitching in single A. And so you hear like these college kid announcers, and here's Jacob DeGrom throwing like a perfect inning against these single A schmucks. I forget what it must have been 2021, obviously. No, 2022, I should say, obviously, because he was rehabbing. And it was so exciting because we hadn't seen the guy pitch in basically a year. So, yeah, I think MLB app offers a select amount of minor league games. But what's really helpful, and I'm so curious to see how this works, is that SNY made a deal with the MLB app. So if you subscribe, whether it's having the cable service and having a login, or you pay for their over-the-air streaming service, I'm phrasing it wrong. If you pay for their streaming service, you get it on the MLB app, as opposed to a completely different app like the Yankees with the Gotham Sports app. So I'm thinking it's going to make it almost user-friendly to bounce around different games, including the Mets.
Well, I'm excited for that, but I haven't invested. Dude, I have so many different freaking apps. I don't know if I can invest in that, but you tell me. I don't know. I haven't done it before. I've never done the MLB app at all.
So it's totally worth it. MLB app is freaking awesome. Freaking awesome. I love it. I love it. And I admit, I've been spoiled because I've had a media access with the MLB app, which has no blackouts. So I've been able to live in a world without blackouts. So I'm hoping for everyone else that this new kind of deal with SNY is basically lifting blackouts, obviously, if you're willing to spend the money, because I know it can be expensive. All right, let's get to Rico topic number 7. And I've never looked at this information before, but I saw it on social media and I started digesting it. And that is a map featuring the strength of schedule for every single team in Major League Baseball, including who has the toughest schedule, who has the softest schedule, which months are the hardest, all broken down. And it's unbelievable. So let me start with our team, obviously, the Mets. The weakest month we have, based on the softest strength of schedule, is April. We actually start the season where our opponents have a combined .476 winning percentage, which, believe it or not, if you look at every team in the National League East, that is the lowest winning percentage in any month for any team in the National League East. And when you look closer at our schedule, it makes sense. Sure, we open in Houston against an Astro team that obviously made the postseason last year. But then there are 3 games against Miami, 3 games against Toronto. Now, I happen to think the Blue Jays are going to surprise a lot of people and have a good year. We are going to do an MLB season preview prediction podcast coming up in a few days. So I'll get into more details on why I think that. I'm not just saying it. But they play the Blue Jays. They play the Marlins again. So 6 of 9 games after they open the season in Houston are against Miami. Then they go to Sacramento to play the A's. They play 3 games against the Twins. Okay, they're a decent team. 4 games against the Cardinals coming off a bad year. 3 games against the Phillies, not easy. And then the month of April pretty much ends in Washington against the Nationals. So when you hear it, when you go over it, you say, yeah, that's not the most difficult April. But the Mets have the weakest, I'm going to correct myself, the second weakest month of any National League East team. The only other month on the calendar of NL East teams that has a weaker month of opponents, of course, the Atlanta Braves in August, which feels very typical because you just know when you combine the fact that Strider's missing time, Acuna's missing time, obviously Sean Murphy now is missing time. So the Braves are going to start the year a little bit behind the 8 ball. Of course, the Mets don't play the Atlanta Braves for a big. When do we play the Braves? In June? I mean, you got to be kidding me. So as the Braves are kind of overcoming all these injuries, the Mets don't see them. But you know the Braves are going to get off to like some kind of mediocre start. It'll give a false sense of security that they're not any good. Combine it with the fact that they're going to get healthier, and then combine it with the fact that they have this easy peasy June, July, and especially August. And there you go. The Braves, wherever they are, will shoot right ahead. But here's the breakdown for the Mets. The easiest month is March, April, 476 winning percentage. May is 499. June is the toughest month the Mets have in their season, a winning percentage of 509. It's back down to 499 in July, 501 in August, and then September is 497. The Mets' opponent winning percentage is 496. It is tied for the third toughest schedule in the NL East. The toughest schedule belongs to Miami. When you think about this and you say, okay, well, what determines a tough schedule? I mean, really, we're all facing the same teams. The only difference is, and I'm talking about our division rivals, not obviously how the Dodgers and the Rockies are facing different schedules because they're in a completely different division, and we still have, to a degree, an unbalanced schedule. Not as unbalanced as it used to be where you'd face your division opponent 19 times. Now it's 13 times. But there really aren't many differences between our schedule and, let's say, the Braves schedule. And you think about it and you say, okay, well, what's the difference? The difference is the Mets are stuck playing the Yankees 6 times. Every year now, we're going to be stuck playing them 6 times. But outside of that, the schedules are very similar. But overall, the softest schedule in Major League Baseball. You want to know who that belongs to, Pete? You want to guess? There are 30 teams in Major League Baseball. Which team will have the softest schedule based on winning percentage of their opponents?
The Dodgers.
You nailed it. The Los Angeles Dodgers at 493. The Colorado Rockies have the toughest schedule. In fact, the toughest schedules are all teams that had bad years because they're in divisions where they are facing good teams. Like the problem with the White Sox is they can't play the White Sox. That's the biggest issue, which is why the strength of schedule gets raised. But yeah, the Rockies, Marlins, White Sox, Angels, and A's have the top 5 toughest schedules in baseball. The Mets are 21st. The Yankees are 13th. The Braves are 27th. And by the way, the higher number is softer schedule. So the Braves being at 27th means there's only 3 teams in baseball who have easier schedules than Atlanta. Now, what do you do with this information? Does it mean that much? Look, it really doesn't. It's more interesting to think about as we sit here in March, but obviously a lot of things can change. If I'm right that the Blue Jays are better than people think, then when you play the Toronto Blue Jays, it's much more difficult than maybe the way this chart is telling you, or vice versa with a team that was really good last year that sucks this year, whatever team you want that to be. So what does it mean? It doesn't mean much. Here's what it means. Beat the Phillies and the Braves. Look, if the Mets are going to win this division, if they're going to have success, they did a good job against those teams last year. They basically split it. And basically they were 500 against Atlanta and Philadelphia, and I'd sign for that. I think if you can kind of play and tread your water against the elite teams in your division and then beat up the teams you're supposed to beat, then you're in good shape.
What's the projections you like out of curiosity? As far like Pacoda, like do you no, is there one that you actually like, or do you don't care for any of them?
No, they all suck. You can't project baseball. Now we're going to try. Okay. We're all going to make predictions, but predictions are like asses. Everybody has one. So one thing I've learned about Pacoda, because I did a little bit of a study a year ago. I took the Pacoda projections and then compared it to the actual results. And it's not accurate. It's not. Look, baseball's a fun game. I'm going to give you my opinion on teams. There are going to be a lot of people in the audience who are going to say, you're an idiot, Evan, or you're wrong. I'm not an idiot. We're just going to disagree. And there are going to be cases in which I'm going to be very wrong. And hopefully there'll be some cases where I'm very right or close to right. But I think it's just using your eye test and watching baseball and kind of having feelings like, hey, I have a feeling that Bo Bichette doesn't suck. I just do. I don't think he's going to be as bad as he was last year. We shall see. That's the beauty of baseball.
Does that mean you're going to draft Bo Bichette in our draft, in our fantasy draft?
Well, Pete, you should pay more attention. Bo Bichette is a keeper. He's a kept player in our fantasy league. So, no, I do not have a chance to keep him. And I'm not giving that opinion based on fantasy. I'm just giving you that opinion based on I think he's better than this. And he's a free agent at the end of the year, so we'll see.
I love those walk years.
Those are fun. Those are fun. Let's go to Rico, topic number 6, and that is about David Stearns and his approach. There was a great article in The Athletic talking deeply about David Stearns and his approach and what we learned about him last year and obviously what he did in Milwaukee. Here's what David Stearns had to say about making moves and being aggressive. These are his words. I am probably even more inclined to action now as I have gone throughout my career. I have gotten to the point where I would rather make mistakes of commission rather than make mistakes of omission. So what does that mean? I think we saw it last year. The Mets did not play well. We got off to a very bad start. We were very frustrated on the Rico Brogna. And Joey Wendell was a guy that was complained about. I read a lot of emails about the Mets have to DFA Joey Wendell, and I talk about how sometimes I'll admit when I'm wrong, but maybe sometimes I want to take bows when I'm right. Well, this is a time in the Rico in which I'm going to take an L on something. Every time someone would bitch about Joey Wendell and how they should DFA them, I would say they're not going to DFA the guy. They just signed him. They're paying him $4 million a year, and he's better than this, so they're going to ride it out. Where I was wrong is that David Stearns doesn't believe in riding things out. He doesn't believe in mistakes of omission. He believes in making the mistakes of commission. And so David Stearns did something I didn't see him doing. I've learned my lesson because now I'm learning more about David Stearns. And what did they do to Joey Wendell? They cut his ass. That's what they did. What did they do to Jorge Lopez when there was the incident of glove throwing? They cut his ass. It took a while, but eventually Brett Baty was dethroned as the third baseman and Mark Vientos became the guy. There are examples of this. There are examples of all the different DFAs. I remember, Hoff, you were talking about this a lot with the pitchers where, boy, and I'm forgetting so many names from last year. The guy we got from the Braves who he DFA'd and
Michael Tonkin.
There you go.
That guy circled around the entire league. He was like the I don't want to say the bad word, but he was like a woman of the night.
Yeah. Valerie Malone. She's a character, so I don't feel bad. That's not a real person. But for those that watch 90210, you'd say, that's a good reference. Yeah.
Good pull.
But he showed you, I'm not going to sit around. And so when you asked about 5 minutes ago, are there any prospects that are untouchable? I have a feeling, and I've been wrong about this so far. I thought that David Stearns would make a quote-unquote big trade during the offseason. That hasn't happened, and the season's about to start. But I think he will during the season. I think David Stearns is ready to make a big splash when it makes sense. Obviously, it, in his eyes, did not make sense during this offseason. We may have screamed for Luis Castillo. In his eyes, it didn't make sense. We were screaming, not me, but some others, for Dylan Cease. So far, it hasn't made sense. I do believe he will be aggressive at the right time. And I think that it's probably going to be a pitcher. Obviously, that makes the most sense. And I said this a few Ricos ago. I'll get more specific. I think it's going to be Sandy Alcantara. I think he's going to be a New York Met. I do. And I'm going to read you another quote from that David Stearns article that shows you that executives around the league are thinking the same thing. Rivals sense the impact. In casual conversations this spring, multiple high-ranking executives from different clubs predicted that the New York Mets would be one of the most active front offices once the regular season starts. They cited last year's success, Juan Soto's presence, and a maturing farm system. I completely agree. So I may have been off on time because this is something I was projecting during the offseason. Again, that hasn't happened, but I do expect something like that during the regular season if the right opportunity comes. So I think when we talk about these prospects, don't fall too much in love because I think David Stearns will strike at the right time. And then we'll judge him based on the player he got back and what those prospects turn into. Because there's two ways to judge this thing, You trade Jonah Tong and you get Dylan Cease. We may all celebrate. If Dylan Cease fails this year or doesn't pitch up to snuff, and then they let him go as a free agent, and then Tong becomes a star in San Diego, well, we may not be thrilled, to say the least. Let's get to Rico topic number 5, and that is A.J. Minter and Dednil Nunez could start the year on the injured list. Yeah, Tim Britton had a pretty good article. Tim Healy or Tim Britton? Jesus, man. They get the Athletic guy. Tim Britton had an article in The Athletic detailing a lot of interesting scenarios with the Met roster, and one was the idea that A.J. Minter and Dednil Nunez could very well start the season on the injured list. Let's take this one by one. A.J. Minter starting the year on the injured list would be, A, I'd be surprised, and B, would be a massive disappointment considering Minter's pitching. He's going out there and he's throwing. Now, he did not look good on Wednesday night against the Astros. He gave up a home run. It was his worst spring training outing. Assuming he doesn't feel bad, assuming there isn't any kind of physical issue, A.J. Minter, to me, is already throwing enough to where he should be ready for the start of the season. So I would be disappointed if we get the news that A.J. Minter is starting the year on the IL. Now, let me get to Dednil Nunez because I think that's a very different situation and a very delicate situation. So Dednil Nunez finally got into a game a couple of days ago in spring training, and he looked great. He didn't miss a beat. He was throwing 97. He had that swing and miss stuff. It was everything we remembered about Nunez before he got hurt. But I'm going to make the case right now on why he should start the year on the injured list. Carlos Mendoza has already admitted that they need to handle him with care, that he will not pitch multiple innings this year. Well, if you remember, Dednil Nunez pitched multiple innings a lot last year. That was a part of what made him such a great weapon. But okay, I'm not arguing. The Mets were obviously very concerned physically with him. So one rule, we'll call these the Dednil rules. It's like bringing back the Jabba rules all these years later. Rule number 1 is he won't pitch multiple innings. Okay, I think we all accept that. Rule number 2 is they are not going to pitch him on back-to-back days for a while. I would guess, based on how they're going to handle him, and this may be outlandish, I don't think he's going to pitch him back-to-back games for a few months. And hopefully we get to the point where he's healthy and the Mets are confident enough in his health, and he is pitching in back-to-back games. But as of right now, the idea that he's going to make the team not pitch in back-to-back games, and oh, by the way, it's not like the back-to-back rule is like the Lugo rules from a few years ago where, well, he just went out and pitched 2 1/3 innings. Of course you're not bringing him back on a back-to-back, similar to Jose Budo. He's only getting 3 outs. So the reason why I would want to put him on the injured list to work his way back is I think early in the season, when you're not getting a lot of innings out of your starters, and clearly that's going to be the case. That's everywhere in baseball. Watch that Cub-Dodger series. The same thing will happen with the Mets. They're not pushing their starters to where guys are even throwing 90 pitches. I'd be surprised. I think we're looking at 70s and 80s, especially the first couple of turns around. So you're not getting a lot out of your starters, and now you're sort of handicapped with a reliever who you're being very careful with, can't pitch on back-to-back days, and can't pitch more than 1 inning. So my attitude would be put him on the injured list, extended spring training, let him continue to work his way back. And then as you are more confident in him, but also more confident that your starters are now a few turns around and may go deeper into games, then I think you activate him. So I will not be upset if Nunez is on the IL. I would just assume everything I said resonates with the Mets because no back-to-back days, no multiple innings. Your starters aren't going to go deep into games in all likelihood because it's early in the season. I mean, you need a couple of guys in your bullpen that can go deep. You need a couple of guys in your bullpen that can get more than 3 outs. And I'm not just talking about a long reliever like a Paul Blackburn. So Minter, I'd be disappointed about. Nunez, I understand, if not endorse.
Could I ask what the A.J. Minter is kind of weird because, like you said, he has pitched a little bit enough that, like, I mean, are these considered rehab starts for him? Is it extended rehab? How does this work?
What do you mean? Like, why would A.J. Minter start the year on the injured list?
Yeah,
because you pitching.
Yeah, are they going to come up with like ridiculous. Like, oh,
Careful.
Yeah. He pulled his back randomly. Are they going to come up with something that's nonsense?
No, I don't think that's nonsense when you just deem a guy not ready. I think it's different when you're coming out of spring training and you're coming off an injury. Like Dednell Nunez and AJ Minter are coming off injuries. They're both obviously pitching. And remember, you can backdate these IL stints. I think the number when you start the season is 5 days of spring training. So if you go on the 15-day IL, which is the number for pitchers, 10 days into the year, you can activate them, which is not, that late into the season. But no, I don't think you have to worry about it being a fake injury because there's a real injury. AJ Minter had hip surgery during the season, during the offseason. Minter, I'd be surprised about. I respect Tim Healy's reporting, or Tim Britton's reporting. Tim Britton's reporting. I apologize to the Tims. They're both excellent.
They're both great guys.
They really are. It's nothing personal. Yes. By the way, I do want to welcome one of our great new sponsors. We have an official sake of Rico Brogna. So celebrate your highlights with Mio Sparkling Sake, a true crowd pleaser, light, bubbly, and easy to join. Whether you're at Citi Field, whether you're hanging out at your favorite spot listening to the Rico, ask for a Mio Sparkling Sake by name. It's a new tradition, served chilled, imported from Japan, the official sake of the New York Mets and Rico Brogna. Let us get to Rico Brogna, Rico number 4 here on the Rico 10. And that's the fact that the spring training stats from the likely Met rotation is stupid. It is insanely stupid. Clay Holmes, 14 innings, 2 earned runs. David Peterson pitched on Wednesday night, 5 scoreless innings. He's up to 15 2/3 innings, 1 earned run. Kodai Senga hasn't pitched a lot, 5 1/3 innings, 2 earned runs when he's pitched in official spring games. Griffin Canning, 10 innings, 1 earned run, 16 strikeouts, and 2 walks. And then Tyler McGill, who I think right now is a likely Met rotation man. More on that as we continue the Rico 10. 11 2/3 innings, 5 earned runs. If you take those 5 guys and you put Paul Blackburn aside because there are some interesting thoughts that Blackburn will start the year in the bullpen. So if we include Holmes, Peterson, Senga, Canning, and McGill, the New York Met rotation in spring training has struck out 59 guys in 56 2/3 innings with 16 walks, which not a high number considering the Mets had some walk issues last year. And they have pitched to a combined ERA of 1.75. Holmes, Peterson, Canning, and Senga have given up 6 earned runs, and they have done that in 44 innings. So the question is, Hoff, does this make us nervous and say, boy, can they give up a couple of runs before the season starts? Or does this make you giddy that maybe the Met rotation is going to be a lot better than people think? I have to admit, there's a part of me that wants them to give up some runs. Just a few.
Yeah, listen, we talked about this already so many different times. Like, who carries over these type of numbers from spring training to regular season? We talk about whether it's good or bad. So, like, we look at somebody who's just like, look at Pete Alonso. He hit his first home run today. What would he freaking do? He's batting 220. Do I think that he's going to carry those numbers over and he's going to be a 220 hitter all season long? I don't think so. I think he's going to have a freaking baller season with Juan Soto and Francisco Lindor. Do I trust this pitching staff to be this freaking good? I want to, but no, I think it's definitely going to come back to, like, Clay Holmes is not like I don't know if you really put in the Cy Young Award for him to try to win that.
I did.
Okay, well, good. I don't think he's going to win. No offense to you or Clay Holmes.
Well, I also put a bet last year for Luis Severino to win the National League Cy Young. I did not win that, but it was fun. Sometimes you just have to make a bet just for fun and stick it to your friends who are Yankee fans, thinking about the idea of Luis Severino winning the National League Cy Young, or in this case, Clay Holmes winning the National League Cy Young. I put no stock in spring training stats. I want to make that clear. I do not. I never have. I never will. Or maybe I have a long time ago when I was young. I think that when I look at these performances, I don't want to say whatever, blah, 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 because Griffin Canning striking out 16 guys in 10 innings and changing his repertoire slightly, or at least the way he described it was his menu of when he throws certain pitches. I don't want to minimize that. I don't want to minimize the fact that Clay Holmes is converting from reliever to starting pitcher, and he's had success even in games that don't count. I don't want to minimize it, but I need to see everybody do it when games matter. Like Kodai Senga, it doesn't matter. Even David Peterson, to a degree, doesn't matter. I think Canning and Holmes are a little bit different. Tyler McGill doesn't matter either, by the way, because we've seen McGill have great spring trainings. And until proven otherwise, McGill basically is what he is, which is a walking 5-inning, 3-run guy. That's basically what he's always been when he's been in the Met rotation. And if they're scoring enough runs, that's good enough, by the way. I mean, those are performances that every once in a while you'd say, hey, that was good enough to win. So I think it matters on a case-by-case basis. I wanted to share the numbers because they're impressive. Now, what you want to do with those numbers, that's up to the individual at home. You may say it doesn't mean anything to me, or you may say that excites me. Griffin Canning is interesting to me because I haven't watched a lot of Griffin Canning. I don't think any of us have. And his windup reminds me of David Cone. I don't know if anyone else had that feeling. Like, I'm trying to describe that David Cone, like he bends over and his leg is up and it's extended and it's out. Like, watching Griffin Canning reminds me of David Cone. Now, that doesn't mean he's going to be David Cone. That would be nice. But look, these guys are pitching incredibly well. And overall, the Mets team ERA is 3.32. It's the lowest in Major League Baseball here in spring training. And the key is, can they take this into the start of the year? I think the biggest adjustment Clay Holmes is going to have is going to be, can he get guys out a second and third time around the order? Now, I want to give you perspective here, Hoff, because what do spring training numbers mean? Do you mind if I give you some from last year? We all know how everybody performed, so let's just see if there was any correlation. Sean Manaea, who ended up having a very good year, through 16 2/3 innings in spring training, gave up 6 runs. That's a 3.24 ERA, 21 strikeouts, 4 walks. So I would actually say his spring training numbers pretty much was his regular numbers. I mean, it kind of indicated the season he was going to have. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Jose Quintana made 5 starts and pitched to a 6.19 ERA. So Quintana obviously was very bad, pitched a lot better than that. Luis Severino had a dominant spring training, 14 innings, 2 runs, 12 strikeouts, and a walk, a 1.29 ERA. Obviously, Sevy wasn't quite as good as that, but that's a pretty damn good spring training. So you would say he at least, he didn't replicate that, obviously. He would have won the Cy Young, but he had a good year.
No, and he started out better than he finished. So not saying that he was that good, but he started out very well.
Christian Scott, I'm not going to include him. He only threw 5 innings. Jose Budo, 10 innings, 1 run, pitched to a 0.90 ERA in spring training, and he ended up having a good year. Adrian Hauser made 4 starts, pitched to a 5.25 ERA. So that pretty much told you what he was going to do. He sucked the rest of the year. So the pitching was kind of accurate in terms of performance. Now, do you want to hear offensive numbers and see how that translated?
I do.
All right. Let's start with Francisco Lindor, who has had a terrible spring training. In case anybody's paying attention to these offensive numbers, Juan Soto, you can't get out. Brett Baty's a machine, made a diving play on Wednesday night, and he's also hitting the cover off the ball. But Francisco Lindor is having a bad offensive spring training, which hopefully just means he's getting his April and Mays out of his system. Mark Vientos last year in spring training hit .232 with 5 home runs. So hit a lot of home runs, did not hit for a high batting average. Brett Baty didn't have a great camp last year. .245 average, 767 OPS. Pete Alonso had a really good spring training, .321 average, 947 OPS. Francisco Lindor, same thing. Terrible spring training. Hit 145 with a 433 OPS, which is basically the numbers he's had this year. So, yeah, there's really nothing to draw out of it. I just wanted to give you the information.
The only thing is that the one thing that bothers me is we do know that Lindor starts off slow. Like,
Yeah.
what's to say that he's not going to have another bad April? And I'm not going to overreact to it because we saw what he did last year after the end of May.
Lindor has taught us not to overreact. And what will make it easier if he does get off to a bad start is there are enough guys in this lineup where he can get off to a bad start and the lineup can still click. Juan Soto can be Juan Soto. Pete Alonso could get off to a great start. Mark Vientos could get off to a great start. All signs are there that Brandon Nimmo is healthy. He played left field. He batted fifth in Wednesday night's game. So signs are certainly pointing towards Nimmo being fully ready to go for the start of the year. So Lindor could get off to a bad start, and it may not, sink the team the way it felt like it was sinking them last year. The lineup was very different coming into the season as compared to this year when you have Juan Soto and a guy like Mark Vientos that you trust. I think those two things make the lineup very, very different.
Yeah, listen, again, 162 of Mark Vientos should, and if he rebounds off of what he did last year, I mean, yeah, it's going to be very exciting. Again, I also like the platoon at DH. We haven't talked about that much, but again, is he fully ready to go?
Marte has been playing a lot. He's been DHing. There is a plan to get him into the field before spring training ends. So, yeah, Marte's a full go. I mean, right now, Jesse Winker is the one who had the little concern a few days ago when he swung and it looked like he injured his calf. He's downplayed it, says it's not a big deal. So I'm going to trust him. I'm going to trust Carlos Mendoza. But, yeah, the Winker-Marte platoon should be good to go. And remember, on opening day, they're facing a lefty in Framber Valdez. So Starling Marte will be, in all likelihood, your opening day designated hitter.
I love it, dude. I love it. Let's go.
Let's get to Rico topic number 3. And that is Acuna and Baty may make the team. Now, I'm not against this. I laid out over the last few Ricos why I thought Acuna wouldn't make the team, but I am certainly not against Acuna making the team because in the short term, would I rather have Luis Angel Acuna on this team or Donovan Walton? The answer is Luis Angel Acuna. I think that Mendy can get creative in trying to get him out there. Clearly, when there's a lefty on the mound, you want to put Brett Baty in a position to succeed. So on opening day against Framber Valdez, Baty probably doesn't play. Luis Angel Acuna plays. I also think that you're going to take Baty out late for defense. So even on the days where Baty plays, Acuna will come in as a pinch runner. He will come in for defense. So I think the Mets are going to try to find ways to have him active for the first few weeks with McNeil out. I still expect that Baty is going to get the big crack to play second base, and he's also earned that. Brady's had a great camp. He's improved defensively. He's hit a ton. So Baty should get most of the at-bats to start, but I think it's going to be important for Mendy to keep Acuna active, and I think you can do that. Clearly coming in for defense is going to be something that happens anytime the Mets have a lead. We mentioned that Luis Torrens is going to be a prime candidate to be pinch hit for, and that also could be Luis Angel Acuna. I mean, maybe you trust his bat enough where he's the bat coming off the bench. So the idea that Acuna and Baty both making the team, that was also in the same report by Tim Britton, is an interesting one. I'm certainly not against it. I would say that I'm mildly surprised because I thought they were going to play that game of Acuna needing to play every single day at AAA, but clearly they see enough of an opportunity from him early, especially when there are lefties on the mound, like opening day against Framber Valdez and the Houston Astros. Let's go to Rico topic number 2. And this is for everybody out there who has their tickets to opening day, the Mets home opener. How will the rotation line up and who will pitch the home opener? Well, the indications we're getting is that obviously Clay Holmes is pitching opening day. We were all aware of that. And that Kodai Senga and David Peterson may be held back to pitch in Miami against the Marlins. The reasons for Peterson is lineup decision. I remember Mendy did this a lot last year, especially against the Yankees. The Yankees were very susceptible to left-handed pitching. So while some thought Luis Severino was ducking the Yankees, it was just Carlos Mendoza playing the matchups. And it worked. It worked out incredibly well because the lefties he threw out there, I'm trying to remember I think it was Minaya and Peterson, definitely Peterson, threw good games against the Yankees. It may have been Quintana. So I think in this case, Mendy's playing the matchups, looking at the Astro lineup and saying, you know what? There's a lot of good right-hand hitters in that Houston lineup. Sans Yordan Alvarez. let me save Peterson for Miami. Let me also save Senga for Miami. So if that is the case, that means you are looking at Clay Holmes in the opener, and then Tyler McGill and Griffin Canning, or Paul Blackburn, who is a candidate for this, pitching 2 and 3 in Houston, which would then set you up to have, in no particular order, but I'm going to guess Peterson first. Peterson on that Monday in Miami, Senga pitching game number 5, so you want to call him the 5th starter, fine, but it's just lining guys up. Tuesday in Miami, and that would mean Clay Holmes would pitch the finale of that series against the Marlins late Wednesday afternoon. So the choice would then be whoever pitches game 2 of the season would pitch the home opener. That would either be Griffin Canning or Tyler McGill or Paul Blackburn if he gets the start. I mean, it's not appealing. It's not what you would have on your depth chart of who I want starting the home opener. But the reality is, and I've said this before, it doesn't actually matter. You're not going to remember who starts the home opener, just like how, do you remember who started it last year? It was Jose Quintana. Do we remember who started it the year before? You sort of forget. But it is lining up to be either Griffin Canning or Tyler McGill pitching the Mets home opener against the Blue Jays on April 4th.
Wasn't it Tyler McGill 2 years ago?
It was Tyler McGill in the season opener against Washington. Now, who did the home opener? Did he also do the home opener? I mean, it's possible. That's the point. I don't remember.
I just remember when Tyler McGill, we're sitting there going through all these guys that the Mets can have to start the season, and we got stuck with Tyler McGill. Now, was it the worst thing in the world? I think he pitched an okay game. But it's amazing how Tyler McGill continues to be in this spot for home opener.
You are 1,000% correct. So Tyler McGill not only started the season opener in 2022 because of injuries, the home opener in 2023 was also started by Tyler McGill. So
how about that?
Can you imagine this guy? The big drip is legit possibility to start his 3rd semblance of an opening day in 4 years for the New York Mets.
Outrageous. That's our guy, Tyler McGill.
In that game against the Marlins, Tyler McGill, 6 scoreless innings, and he got the victory as the Mets beat the Marlins on the home opener by a final score of 9-3. I think this was the same game where the Seaver statue was debuted, if memory serves correct.
Is that the game?
I think so. I think it was the same game, the April of 2023, when the Seaver statue came out.
That wasn't versus the Diamondbacks for some reason? Why am I thinking Diamondbacks?
Was it 2022? When did this? Hold on. Now you got me interested.
I think that was 2022 because you want to know. Because I'll tell you why. Hold on. Can you give me 30 seconds?
You're right, by the way. It was a year earlier. It was 2022. Look at you. You're remembering everything today. I'm impressed.
Hold on. I'll be right back. I'll show you.
Oh, all right. Pete Hoffman has just left the Rico Brogna because he wants to show us something. But yeah, he remembered that. April of 2022. The pandemic delayed it, and they played the Diamondbacks on a Friday. And yes, the Seaver statue made its debut. The following year, 2023, home opener against the Miami Marlins, Tyler McGill pitched. Seaver statue had already been there for a year. It was growing fleas. Where the hell did Pete go? Are you going to show me the statue or something like that? That's what I'm thinking he's doing. Maybe the date is carved out on the Seaver statue. And that was one of the great giveaways because they gave away the Tom Seaver statue the following day. And one of the best giveaways they've ever had. It really is. And that statue is awesome. That's a meeting spot now at Citi Field. Where are you going to meet? You can meet by the Apple. Certainly an option. And right by the Apple, you have the giant Tom Seaver statue. It does make me want more statues, but I've given it thought over the years. I don't know if there's an individual player that I would give a statue to. No offense to Piazza or David Wright or anybody you want to come up with. I almost think it would need to be iconic moments that get a statue.
All right.
Pete. So what do you want to show us?
This is for the visual, and I apologize for the people listening. But this is the coolest thing that I ever got at a baseball game. I went with Stu Feiner, so that's why I remember it. We got, and I can't find it. We have it somewhere in his room. My JD has it. Look at this.
Oh, wow. Is that the lineup card from the game?
Yes.
That is,
and I have
cool.
the Mets. I have the Mets too. This is why I remember it so well. So this is the coolest piece of memorabilia I have. So I have the Diamondbacks and the Mets.
That is very cool. A lineup card from opening day. And that was the season opener because of the lockout. Like the lockout pushed back the start of the season. And so the season started on April 15th, or they played a few days before that. I got to look that one up because that was such a mess because of the lockout that the season got pushed back. And so they just picked up the schedule. No, they opened on the road. That's right. They opened in Washington. Oh, that's when McGill started that's right. That's when McGill started the season in Washington, D.C. on a Thursday night that had a lot of rain.
Full circle, baby. Full circle.
It all comes full circle. And that brings us to Rico topic number 1, which we've referred to a little bit. And that's the fact that Tyler McGill may make the rotation and Paul Blackburn may well make the bullpen. That is something the Mets are strongly considering. So if they view Paul Blackburn as a better option out of the bullpen than Tyler McGill, God bless him, I don't see it. I have been intrigued for a while about McGill as a short reliever, but I guess the Mets are viewing this as they need a long man. They need someone to throw 3 or 4 innings in the case that, a guy gets knocked out early or the weather is bad early in the season and there's a rain delay and you need someone to eat a few innings. I also kind of view this as maybe the Mets look at the first few weeks as an audition. So they're going to start the year with a 5-man rotation. Sean Manaea should be able to re-enter the rotation, barring any setbacks, by late April. And they do plan on going to a 6-man rotation. According to the schedule, assuming rainouts and doubleheaders don't change this, the first time the Mets would need to go to a 6th starter so that they could keep Kodai Senga from pitching on 4 days rest would be April 19th. So the Mets may be viewing this as a 3-week, let's say 3 to 4 start audition for Tyler McGill, knowing he has options, knowing, hey, we're going to have to make a decision on possibly sending someone to the bullpen or just sending somebody down once Manaea is healthy. Because even though those 3 guys battling for the last 2 spots, eventually it'll be 3 spots. And if Blackburn gets used to pitching out of the bullpen and they like what they see from Tyler McGill, then Sean Manaea can enter the rotation as the 6th man. McGill doesn't get sent down, and Blackburn is your just long guy out of the bullpen, which definitely has a value. A few years ago, it was Trevor Williams. If you want to go back even further, it was a guy like Darren Oliver. You want to go back even further, it was a guy like Pat Mahomes Sr. So there is certainly a vital role in somebody that can come in and eat a bunch of innings, especially, and we talked about this earlier, when you got a guy like Dednell Nunez who can't go multiple innings. So I'm intrigued by this. And if you go by performance, look, Tyler McGill's had a better camp than Paul Blackburn. Not that you want to parse every single stat, but certainly interesting because with options, you'd assume the Mets would just play the easy game of let's send Tyler McGill down and let him start every 5 days. So right now it feels like you are looking at Griffin Canning and Tyler McGill filling out the Met rotation behind what would be Clay Holmes, Kodai Senga, and David Peterson. We'll keep an eye on it over the next few days and see when Carlos Mendoza makes it official. We do appreciate you listening to our Rico 10. Any comments, disagreements, you can always email us, thericob@gmail.com, and we will try to read a lot of your emails on the next edition of the Rico. As we get closer to opening day, there's a few special Ricos we will be doing leading up to opening day. I'm very excited about it. We will do a specific Met prediction podcast where we try to predict everything about this upcoming season. We will do a full MLB prediction podcast, and we'll also analyze the 26-man roster when it's finally announced. And once opening day is over, on Thursday against the Astros, we will have an instant reaction Rico Brogna soon after that game ends against the Astros on March 27th, which, believe it or not, is a week away. Can you feel it? Can you taste it? Well, thank you very much for subscribing, downloading, and hanging out with us on another live edition, new edition of Rico Brogna.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.